Podcast is a weekly exploration into a new philosophy of money through psychology, philosophy, and practical wisdom. In this episode of the Mindful Money Podcast,
for me, and I think for a lot of people, money is an end of itself. It's not. What I do in this world to make a difference is where I'm pointing, and the money is the exchange.
just tell the guest a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, I am known a lot as a corporate lawyer. And that is because my work career is now about nearly 30 years into being a lawyer, all 30 of which have been in various positions, which you would call which lawyers and others might call corporate law. And I represent businesses in a variety of ways, soup to nuts. If you think of any kind of way that a business interacts with a lawyer, I do that. That could be when they're at the idea phase saying, what do we do? We got this idea. How do we form? Should we be this entity or that kind of entity, and partnerships and financing and mergers and acquisitions all the way through. But as you know, the lawyer thing for me, while I'm known for it, is just a part of what I do, because I discovered not too long ago, say about 5 years ago, that the skill sets that I used to practice law were very typical of what lawyers do, but also missing where the issues were for my clients, let alone for myself as well. And so that's where the whole mental arts part comes in. And I'm probably the only lawyer, well, at least that I know of in the world, that does what I do.
So you do the corporate law, and then you've got this other aspect. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So for me, a good place to start the story is that I had left a large law firm. I got fired from a large law firm. First time for me in my entire career that I was out of work. And the being fired was very predictable, because I saw it coming, because I wasn't, I just wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. I wasn't into that job, you can say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd noticed always as practicing law that there was a lot of stress, not just amongst lawyers, but amongst the people that I represent as lawyers, amongst really everybody that I was interacting with. And I also saw how there were not really any ways out there to get to the heart, let's say the core of where that stress is coming from. And I know from my own personal experience, I was bumping up into the same problems that I had always bumped up into. They're just patterns that repeat. You can think of them like programs, just like your computer program. They're just going to do the same thing over and over again. And so after having gotten fired, I was at a business networking event kind of looking for my next gig. And somebody had asked me whether I had heard about a flotation tank. And I had not. I had tried many different modalities. I did, energy work and acupuncture and various other things. And I did get some relief, but I started to see a pattern. And the pattern was that it was more like treating the symptoms. Like it was relaxing to get acupuncture, and it was relaxing to get a massage, and it was relaxing to do meditation. But something was missing. So through my discovery of floating, I was able to connect with this organization called Mental Arts, which is a affiliation of float centers. And what makes Mental Arts unique is that they provide a full suite, a full curriculum of seminars where people can actually get down and explore their own thinking and get some tools to resolve it. Now, what was kind of earth-shaking for me at the point was that those places are hidden from people.
Mm-hmm.
They call them, or some use the term subconscious. They use it for a reason. There actually are vast parts of our thinking that are below the level of awareness.
So when you say those places, what are you referring to? I don't know if I lost you there for a second, or
places in thinking. So, like for me, I was able to observe around this time that I had certain behavior patterns, things that kept coming up again in relationships and work, and we can talk about the specifics. But I think pretty much everybody can identify with kind of repeating patterns of things, and I saw them with my law clients all the time. People starting in businesses failing for what you could say was a new kind of reason, but yet they had just an amazing consistency to them. So I knew that there was something really much deeper in terms of what was going on for me and for my clients. Those are the places that I refer to, deeper parts of thought. And as I said, I had not found any place that, for me, that gave me the equipment, the ability to actually go in there and, like an inner explorer as opposed to an astronaut, and kind of take a peek and say, yeah, this one works fine. This part, not so much.
Awesome. Yeah. And we definitely are going to dive more into that here, but it's interesting that you have this sort of dual life, right? On the one hand, you're a corporate lawyer. On the other hand, you've got a float company now.
Yeah.
So for most people on this show, what I'll do is I'll ask them one question, and we kind of went off a little bit into your story, but I think it frames up this question just perfectly, which is, what do you see as the purpose of money, and how has that evolved from when you were younger?
Money is an energy. It's a way that we exchange energy, for the things we do, for the impact that we make in this world. And there is a saying that I had heard as a kid, but I really didn't understand it until more recently. And it goes something like this. It says, compensation is commensurate with something like impact or service to humanity. That's a lot different. And I think as a lot of kids, money was an end for itself. It was like a status thing. It's something that, that if I obtain this much money, I can retire, or I can do these things, or, I'd have a certain status.
It is the end once you have it, right? As a kid. Yeah.
It was, we should say it was kind of more shallow understanding for me as a kid than it is for me now.
So what is it for you now?
So for now, what I see, or how I see money, is that like everybody, I'm here to do something, and the things that for me, that I do that give me the most, you could say, fulfillment, are things that are servicing to other people. So as a law practice, or as someone who owns a float center, the way I point myself is, where is it that I can make a difference in the community? And that's a lot different way to think about money, because as I make the impact that I want to make, money is the exchange. Money is the way that people show their appreciation that you've made an impact. So one of the ways to talk about the difference is to see that, where for me, and I think for a lot of people, money is an end of itself. It's not. What I do in this world to make a difference is where I'm pointing, and the money is the exchange, where people reward you for that impact, or or I reward them for impacts that they make on my life.
Yeah, but I mean, you even in your introduction, you talked about how, you're a corporate lawyer for people from A to Z, and some of those things are people looking for funding. So there's people out there that will show appreciation and will give that money before there's even the impact to be had. It's like what you just described is kind of like this catch-22. Like I'll get money once I have the impact, but I need money in order to have that impact. So I think it's something deeper than that. I feel like definitely money is this energy, but But there's also this deeper element of, if we just take the word money away and we, put energy in there, and the dynamics of energy, and the dynamics of the way that people interact to create a deeper meaning, is kind of what I'm hearing you talk around, right? You're saying that as you've started to hone in on what you wanted, and what you wanted to do, like, there's been more flow. Would that be?
Well, yeah, that is true. I mean, as in flow of money, with the emphasis on making an impact for people. And it's not, there's no chicken or egg order to it as well. So if someone comes
Mm,
to my law firm and wants me to represent them in financing, it's true. Like going to any professional, that you have to, you put money down at the outset. But where for me the difference is made is that the orientation is that seeing why I do what I do. I'm not in business to make money. People often, particularly a younger generation, if you ask them what they want to do, they may say, "What I want to do is I want to start a business and make X dollars,
hmm
$1 million." I've seen thousands of businesses
That's
fail
in their plan, yeah.
with that in mind.
So what should people go for? What should people reach for? And I have a hunch it's going to be something that shifted for you too, as we look back at your story.
Yeah, like what, like I think the question you're asking is, what should people do? Maybe.
Right. I mean, if the goal, so yeah, what should people do? What advice would you give to people who are just seeking money? Or, what about those businesses where that was their goal and they failed because that was their goal. That was the end that they were reaching for. Right. So, what's the next step for somebody like that? And, as I reflect on your story, you said, "Hey, when I was a kid, that was my thing too, was I reached out for money, and now I'm not in business for the money." So there was a shift there that I think some have embraced, including yourself, and that others haven't. I'm wondering what you think that is.
Yeah, I think for me, it's and this is probably true for everybody, that it's a shift of asking questions. Who am I? What am
Mm,
I here to do? What do I enjoy? Where do I make an impact? As a kid, I had a uncle who was very influential on me, who owned a series of drugstores, and he said to me, "Do what you love, and the
hmm.
money will come." And that's another way to say it. You can say, why are you here? And Simon Sinek will say it differently.
I
He'll
love
say it
him.
start with why. People look for the why. That's why they make purchases. That's why they hire me as an attorney. And if your why is to have money, people are going to see that. If your why is to service humanity, they're going to see that too. Now that's a really big term, but my clients see that. My clients see that, where I want to go is to service their best interests. And that's a very, that's often a collaborative thing. And first finding out what really is in their best interest. What are they really saying? And then two, working with them to get them there. Um, that's really, the why in terms of how I practice law.
So what do you get when you do that stuff? Like when you help them along, when you ask that question of why, when you go through that transformation, what do you think comes? Because I think a lot of people resist that call.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and I think resist is a good way to put it, because it emphasizes that the call is there. It's
Hmm.
already there, right? We're already, everybody has unique skills and has things that they're here to do. And so it's not so much a matter of picking a thing. It's more a
Mm.
matter of taking away the resistances, as you say. And when that happens, well, you're doing, in one way to say it is, you're doing something that you enjoy because it's in line with, wherever it is that pleasure. And that's a whole different perspective, or that's a different way to go through life, because then I've talked to a lot of people who been working until they're 80, and they just love what they do. And it's not, they've found out at some point, hopefully earlier rather than later, that there's really something that they enjoy doing. Money, comes from that. But that's not,
Yeah,
it's,
it's
it's,
not the
it's
reason. It's like this magic trifecta, right? It's like this you have to kind of let go of that resistance, follow what it is that you love. So you have to first acknowledge what it is that you love, have that self kind of exploratory asking the why, as you've said.
Mhm.
And then, I'm not going to say not being afraid to fail, but it's like this keep taking the next step. I was just reading a book by a guy named James Altucher. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's used to be a big hedge fund guy. Now he's got a number of podcasts, definitely up there in terms of wealth. And his advice it was really, really interesting that I was reading this just before you said that, just before we got on here. His whole thing was, find what you're good at and do it. And what you're going to find is that one thing that you're good at, you're going to do more than anything else. If there's a subject that you could read for, read 5 hours a day on and you wouldn't get tired of, okay, that's the subject, just get a sense of mastery around that thing. And then people are going to pay you just for being you, just for showing up.
Yeah, that unique you part, of what you get joy out of, is also a place where you provide a service.
Absolutely. It's either service, it's a product. It's ultimately, it just comes down to showing up, right? It just comes down to knowing what it is that you want and going for it, I think.
Well, yeah, that is, yeah, that's, there's a lot in that, knowing what you want and going for it. But yeah, absolutely.
So that's not the one step, guys. That's like the 10 steps, maybe.
Yeah, and even the steps, right? It's as a kid, and I think this is symptomatic of kind of younger thinking, that there are there are actual destinations. And of course, like we go on trips and there are destinations, but in terms of people would ask me, like, what do I want to be like when I grow up? And it's a big question, but it became apparent to me.
You mean I'm grown up now?
Yeah, exactly. There's always, I went from being having just a corporate law job, and then somewhere around my late 40s, I'm 52 now. I did what's a pretty bold change. But it was because there were things knocking on my door that that had been there, kind of growing knocks, and that was me paying attention to what was already there, not,
Kind of going after it, yeah.
much, yeah, as, to use your phrase, removing resistances, let's say.
Absolutely. And so once you do that, you kind of start to attract more, right? And some would say that's the money. We're saying here that you'll attract the means for it, and the money isn't that end. And having that longer term vision is kind of what gets you there. But there's a lot of words tossed around. Money is like the umbrella term for a whole bunch of stuff, like wealth and prosperity and all those things. What do you think is the difference between those, like money, wealth, and prosperity? I feel like they all have a slightly different energy and they represent different values.
I don't know. I haven't, wealth, is a term that, can bring in lots of things, not just,
Are you resisting the call right now?
Pardon?
Are you resisting the call right now to answer that question?
Yeah, no, it's just like I have 4 kids, so and there's so much pleasure in my life in that, right? And so I have deep friendships, deeper now than I've ever had in my life. And you could, if you wanted, point to all those things and put them under the category of wealth,
Mm-hmm.
And even under the category of prosperity, right? If you grow a beautiful garden and you enjoy the garden, you've had, the way I think about it, there's a prosperity there,
Mm-hmm.
there's a wealth there, there's a beauty there. Money, if you pull out the flowers and sell them, well, then, then you have then you have money too.
So there's a point before money that's really deeper.
Well, I think you're saying. I think the question is whether there's like I'm referring to it, that those, to use those terms, wealth and prosperity, to take into account the things in our life that we take pleasure in. Yeah, that's if that's what you mean, then yeah, there's a whole lot more in wealth and prosperity than just having money. In fact, money, I wouldn't put it in there because
Good.
it's not.
It-
It's rather shallow to measure wealth and prosperity by money.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And that's one of the things that we teach in the program, on the Mindful Money program, is that, we call it a prosperity coaching program, despite the fact that money is in the name. And we do that intentionally to help people kind of pivot away from, I want cash, to, for what? Why? It's asking the question, why? And it's really driven toward happiness. It's almost like we're creating a well-rounded set of values and then just superimposing that on what people see as money, right? So when you have that cash in your bank account, what do you do with it? What do you spend it on? Those kind of questions are what we ask people. So
Yeah,
it leads up to this happiness.
yeah. I mean, I know lots of people, being a corporate lawyer, that have zeros in their bank account that would, by lots of definitions, make them, make them very, people might say, wealthy people. But yet, you know, if you dug below the surface, you'd see that happiness is more than that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, like, what do you think we could change if we could change something in the world? If we could change some perspective that people have in general to bring more prosperity, and I use that word intentionally, and wealth, not money necessarily, but prosperity and wealth to the country, to the world. What do you think that would be?
Well, it would be it would be to change the way we think about a whole lot of things that we've been trained to think about. And because from those from what we think about, comes the behaviors that we engage in. So, for example, the whole thing about rem- remuneration is in proportion to service to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Within that thought, within just that thought,
Well, what's remuneration, first of all?
is compensation.
Okay.
So compensation. So within that thought, that compensation is in relation to the service someone provides to humanity, is the thought that we're in this together. That what I do affects you, and what you do affects me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thought, right? Because that's a thought where that puts an emphasis on our connectedness instead of our separateness. And there's a whole lot of thinking that doesn't take that into account. They're kind of patterns that we've been taught or have been passed down, but they're not just because our dads and our granddads and our grandmas and great grandparents have subscribed to that thought, doesn't mean that we have to stick with them if they're not working for us.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like just look at how people are told about loans and money. I use money intentionally in this case. Nowadays, it's like, you can't get a house or you can't get a car unless you're worthy, right? Unless you have a certain credit score. And so then just in that, I mean, how often, you take the layman, they watch TV, they listen to advertisements, you're going to hear that all the time. So there's this really, I love what you said, because it decouples what we've created in society as this self-worth being driven by what we're calling money or prosperity. And what you're saying is there's got to be this acknowledgement that it's not about worthiness. It's not about what I'm hearing you say. I feel like, tell me if I'm not hearing you right, but it's not about the worthiness, or it's not about any of that. It's just about coming together and realizing that we are in this together, and then starting to ask those critical questions that reveal that skill or that passion that anybody listening has and can manifest in the world. And then through that, they'll get whatever they need through the people.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. When people get right down to it, in terms of where their why is, and if you go through the examples in Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
I love that book, by the way.
You look at people who articulate or have found and articulate their why. Those whys are always community oriented. They always take into account other people, and that's not like an altruistic strategy thing where you tell yourself, I'm going to take into account other people and therefore money will come. It's more of a recognition that really is where people find meaning. That's where the pleasures in life are, because it comports, which is to say it's consistent with the reality that we really are connected. It's not a theory of connectedness. It's we're connected.
Yeah, and I know that if I go shopping, and this is a truth for millennials, and really most of the people listening now, I think, would agree with this. If I go shopping and see that something benefits some kind of fund or foundation, or every dollar that I spend goes toward feeding children. If we take the Thrive business model, right, they contribute a portion of their profits. Every purchase I make, every dollar, I think they match half. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but that goes toward feeding a hungry family that can't afford to buy from that online marketplace. And what happens is people in our generation will flock to those companies just because it's social good. So much so that I'm sure you've heard of benefit corporations at this point, being a corporate lawyer.
I've worked with benefit corporations, and I've been through the application process of how to become a benefit corp.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's blowing up, is this idea of giving back and contributing not only to ourselves for our own selfish reasons, but also to society and that greater goal.
Yeah.
That pivot is part of that, or that is part of the pivot.
Yeah. There's an urging or a movement, or whatever you want to call it, to recognize, you could say it, to even change the thinking, what I was saying before, from a me to a we, from a separateness to a connectedness. And part of that, in historical terms, is very easy to explain, because before we had the ability to even see this connectedness, which you could say that, as before we had, the way to, understand quantum physics, things very much appeared to be separate.
Yeah.
Now we have a way to see that, in fact, there's a connectedness, but we have this legacy or relics from, old ways of thinking. And the whole benefit corp thing is a way, to tap into that already existing desire and drive that people have, investors have, businesses have, to shift that focus from the me to the we.
Yeah. So you already said, start asking why. You've mentioned Simon Sinek a number of times. Yeah. And then you just kind of gave this awesome neuro-linguistic programming tip here of changing from me to we, or that kind of thing. Is there anything else that you would recommend to people that are looking to kind of embrace that new way of thinking and not feel like money is this self-worth thing that it is for some? Is there another piece of advice that you'd want to share with the world?
Well, I mean, the good news really is what you touched upon, is that none of this old way of thinking, or these, let's call them narrow ways of thinking, are carved in stone. They're just ways of thinking. You can think of them as, neuro-linguistic programs or programs, and you can change them. You can actually find the places in your own thinking where they are and change them. And that's a very empowering thing, because it takes away, say, for example, what my grandfather would say, because his thinking was, I am this way. He would say his dad was this way,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd say, I'm just god darn it going to be this way forever because I am that way. But we know now that, yeah, that ain't true. You can actually find those places in your thinking that aren't working so well for you. Those would include, places where you place limits on things and do something different. That that's the whole overlay on the mental arts part of the
Mm.
business that I'm in, because it gives people those tools to get down there and to examine for themselves what's in their thinking that's not working so well according to what they want to do. Nobody's going to tell them that. But to have those tools, you can then, change some of those patterns that don't work as well for wherever it is that you want to go.
Yeah, it's just because your grandparents walked uphill both ways in bare feet in the snow doesn't mean that you should.
Yep.
And I use that intentionally too, because we take on this message of should and what should happen for us to
Yep.
be whatever.
Yep.
And
That's
very
right.
limiting.
Should is a very limiting thing, because if someone tells me it should, I'd like to know why they say that. Tell me why it should, why it must be that way.
Yeah, and on the other side of the spectrum, if somebody says I should and I'm not, then what does that mean about me, right? If I don't have that awareness.
Yeah, in other words, they say that they should be doing something, but they're not.
Right. So if I say to you, hey, you should be walking up the hill both ways barefoot. Well, I'm not doing that. Okay, well then I am. It prompts an I am statement if you're not in touch with that connection.
So are you saying that the person who gives the advice is not following the advice that he or she gives?
Not necessarily, whether they are or not. I'm saying the receiver of that should, of that. We're going back to NLP, right? I'm just teasing apart some of the languaging, right? Yeah. Because you talked about being able to overcome the beliefs that we have. I gave the example of the grandparents walking uphill both ways, barefoot in the snow, whatever. And that just because they did, or just because that person is, or that person is, doesn't mean that I should. And if I believe that I should, if that's the message I'm taking on, then that's a harsh program, is my point.
Well, if they believe that they should,
something, whatever it is, whatever is not calling to them.
Yeah. Simply because someone told them that they have to, I just call that, that's pretty stupid, because, it would make sense to figure out whether that thing that you engage in or you think you're supposed to be doing is actually something that benefits you.
I totally agree. And
maybe it is, maybe it's not, yeah. But how are you going to know unless you embark on that kind of investigation?
Well, right. And that's exactly what I admire in you and other entrepreneurs that I talk to, is that they've said, hey, everybody's saying I should play it safe, or I should have an office job or whatever, but then they'll leave and follow their own passion. So there's a tendency now to be doing that and not listening to that should. And I totally agree with you.
Well, here's the bigger one, that they're going to tell you that you can't.
Yes.
And that you shouldn't.
That is a bigger one.
They're going to jump up and down and tell you that you mustn't, you can't, and you shouldn't, because the thing you do, they'll just say that can't be done, and they'll be relying on all of the things in their own thinking.
Yeah.
Successful people, they don't stop there. They may ask the question why the person thinks that, and then they'll often follow it with, well, let me show you. Step aside. Watch how it's done. And they pave new paths, and that's how things get done.
Yeah, totally agree. So as we kind of come to a close here, I like how deep you went. I like what you shared. I think the tips that you gave are really spot on for people. And you're touching on something so basic that we all share, I think, and this awareness that you've discovered through floating, and that you've been able to take and share with the world through that same medium. One final question, and that is, what kind of a world do you think we would be living in if money as we know it never existed?
Never existed?
Never existed.
What kind of world do I think we'd be living in? Well, so I wonder what would then be in its place,
Mm-hmm.
because there you are providing a skill set that's unique to you, and here I am providing a product or service that's unique to me. Both of us know that we need to eat, and maybe we've already gotten to the point where we know that we're much better together, and together includes maybe things like roads and a professional medical profession and lots of other things. And so we're back at this point where how do we have people do the thing that they're going to do, want to do it, and that's where because they need to eat too, and
Yeah.
so we're back at kind of money.
Yeah, or some form of exchange at least.
Yeah, something.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the interview. And where can people learn more about you, the floating that you've spoken so highly about, and maybe even some of the law stuff?
Yeah, so my law firm's called Kaplan, Williams and Grafeo, and kaplanwilliams.com. You can find out some info about what I do. My flotation tank center is called Quantum Floats, and you can find out information by searching the website quantumfloats.com. And the mental arts, which is the seminar part, the affiliated seminar part of the business, is Mental Arts Network. And if I'm correct from recollection, that website is mentalartsnetwork.com.
Nice. Now, did you found Mental Arts?
Well, the seminar parts have been around for a long time, even before I found floating. But the organization to it, where an actual entity was created, that's a relatively new thing within the last couple of years. And I've been among the group of float centers that has helped bring that into reality. But that, as I said, the actual learning and skills have been around for a long time.
Nice. All right, my friend. Well, I look forward to hearing more about what you're doing in the future and staying connected. There'll be kind of a summary of what you said in the show notes for this episode. And yeah, more awesome stuff to come. So stay tuned, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Cool. You're welcome. You've been listening to the Mindful Money Podcast, the podcast for people who want to align their money with their values. Love this show? Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review. Want more incredible show content? Head over to mindfulmoneypodcast.com for show notes, past episodes, and a sneak peek at what's coming next. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this first season of the Mindful Money Podcast. Stay tuned for season 2. If you're subscribed, you'll get a direct download coming soon.